Well, hello. I'm glad you're watching, and welcome to Thursday's Live with Jim. Uh, this week, we're going to continue and actually finish, hopefully, excuse me, our elephant picture. This is where we are right now, and this is hopefully where we're going today. And we'll see how, excuse me, see how that goes. I got a tickle in my throat. I'm going to get a drink here. And sometimes drawing goes slower than we wanted it to. But I want to point out a couple things I'm doing a little differently today. One thing, if you'll notice over here on my layers panel, I've moved that because that's normally over here, but on ArtRage you can move things around. And I've named all my layers. Up here I've got color because we're going to add a little bit of color in today. And then drawing, little I turns the layer on or off. That's the drawing that we're working on. There's the sketch, and that's what we kind of looked at as a sample last week. And then down at the bottom, of course, is what I'm calling the sample, and that's that elephant there. So I'm pointing that out because if you do a lot of digital work, you're going to use layers more and more. And one thing you'll find if you work with a lot of layers is it really helps to name those. And there are other things that you can do. You can actually group layers together and things like that. But for now, this is a fairly simple drawing. It doesn't use a lot of layers, so there's really no need to group them. But it does help you to keep track of what you're doing. And there are other things that you can do, like over here you see the lock. I can lock a layer. I can lock the whole thing, which means you can't do anything with it. I can lock transparency, which that's something that you use in coloring sometimes. And we're not going to use it today because of the kind of drawing we're doing. But what it does is if you click that, then the only place you can actually draw is where something has already been drawn. If I were to lock transparency, I couldn't make any marks out here. And really, I couldn't make any marks inside here. So what it does allow you to do is it allows you a lot of control in, particularly if you're coloring or shading or things like that. But right now, we're going to leave everything unlocked. We don't really need to lock it. I'm going to turn off my sample. So again, you click on the little eye there, and that's just going to turn that layer off. Layer is still there, but we're not needing it. So that's one thing that I've done a little differently today. The other thing is I have a box called samples, and in most digital art programs, these are often called color swatches, but again, ArtRage kind of has its own names for things, and it calls them samples. And that's actually, you go over to the color picker, and I can take a color and save it over here. So let's say I wanted a really bright red, which I don't, but let's say I wanted a bright red today. I just pick the color that I want, and I go over here and hit this little plus button, and it saves it so that anytime I want to go back to that color, I can get that exact color. Now I don't want bright red, so I'm just going to click remove sample. Something else that lets me do, I've got my reference picture here. I'm going to turn that back on. Okay, click the little eye again. I don't need the box now, so I can close that. And let's move our elephant over. Let's say I wanted to pick up, and that's why I have the samples here. Let's say I wanted to pick up some color from this photo and use it. Well, I can come over to my eyedropper tool, click on that, and then I can come over here and click somewhere in the elephant. Let's say I wanted kind of that creamy color for the tusk. I'm going to get right on it. Okay, now it's given me that color, and then I come over here and I have saved it. So that's color sampling is just a way to be a little bit more precise in your use of color. Excuse me. And so I'm going to click off the color picker for now, and I'm going to just work with the samples. Right now, I'm not going to be doing any color. We're going to be working more with putting a little bit of detail, really kind of picking up on our shading. We didn't quite finish that last time, but I do want to try to get finished with the drawing today. So, I have got my color picker still on. Let me go back to my pencil. What I'm trying to do is enlarge this picture and move it around a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to make this a lot bigger. Okay, so what we're going to do today is to try to add a little bit more detail, a little bit more in the way of shading. And because I had my color picker on, I messed up my color choices. I want to go to a dark, kind of a charcoal color there, charcoal gray. And we're going to, again, compare this elephant with the photo. I'm not trying to make a perfect reproduction here, but I do want to pick up some of the details. So as I come over here, I see like this little shadow here. I see some more definition here. I see some kind of, I don't know if those are veins or wrinkles coming out here. There's a little bit more shading here. So let's start with that. I am going to test out my pencil. It's a little big. Let me shrink it down a little bit. Okay. And let's come over here for starters. And I'm just going to come up and let's bring that shading up a little bit higher there. And then I'm going to kind of bring it around to the side like that. And there's a little right there as it kind of attaches to the skull, as the ear attaches to the skull. And then there are just kind of some curved lines as you go down the ear. Let's put in a few of those. I'm laying them in straight right now. We'll blend them in just a second. And there's another one. I'm not worrying about being exactly in the right position. Just in the ballpark. Come down here, add a little, this will be a lot darker. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to darken this even more because this is really on the dark side of the elephant. The light is hitting it from over here. So I really want this a lot darker than I originally had it. And I'm going to bring that pencil up a little bit larger. I could use a pastel tool, but then it gets a little bit more challenging to blend it. Okay, I'm coming in here. I'm going to try to leave that little place that I shaded that reflects the eye. And I'm going to bring, you notice here, I've got a lot more shadowing on this side of the trunk. I'm going to come over here and do that. And then I'm going to continue on down here. I don't know what you call this part of the anatomy where the trunk goes into the skull. That's this here. But I want to kind of leave that highlight. And come in here, get real dark here. And we're just going to go down along the trunk. And you'll notice here we've got a very sharp shadow. Kind of coming down that way. Sharp end to the shadow line, rather. And then here where the skin wrinkles and twists a little bit, kind of some almost like folds of cloth. Okay, let's go over to the other side. We'll blend in just a minute. Okay, this side is obviously a lot brighter. Over here, we've got kind of a little section where this leg is coming up. And then we've got shadow from light hitting from the front. So this shadow is from the ear down. We're going to go in like that. And again, over here, we've got a little bit more. Skull is coming up here. And we're going to get a little bit of shading here. not just a ton, but more than what I've got right now. Okay, and then, oops, went a little too far there. One thing with digital tablets, and that's what I'm working with, is I need a sharper eraser here. Let's go with instant erase and shrink it way down. At times, the stylus you're working with may get misaligned so that when the tip is hitting the paper, the tip of the stylus, the actual drawing part, the little dot that you see on your screen is not completely aligned, and it really kind of goofs you up. And there is a fix for that. You have to kind of do what's called a monitor calibration, where it gets it set up and realigned. And one of these days I may have to do that right in the middle of class, but right now it's working the way it's supposed to. So, okay, and then over here we've got a little bit, I want to make this a little bit darker because this is really, really very dark. I'm going to shrink that pencil down some more. And then I want to strengthen this line here because it's very dark right along that edge. And again, we've got this curly, wrinkly skin here, which is really cool. Another thing is my right, or actually left tusk shows up on the right here, but it's a little bit short, and I think I'm going to make that a little bit larger. So I'm going to go back to my eraser tool. I want to be really careful to have it very small, and I'm just going to kind of erase that. I may have made it too small there. Let's see. Whoop. Cancel. There it is. Okay, let's get it up a little bit larger. Let me see what I've got here. Let's go with instant erase. For some reason, it's not instant. Well, it is there. I guess I have it too small or something. I'm not sure why, but it's not wanting to erase that tusk. That's the joy of digital art. Sometimes it doesn't do what you want it to. So, plan B, I'm just going to draw over it. I just wanted to make it a little bit bigger. It actually comes farther out here, but I'm not going to try to reproduce that. But one thing it does do is you do have a shadow from that tusk that goes across the trunk. Okay, to lay in the detail of the trunk. Now, again, we'd be here all day if I try to draw this level of detail, so we're not going to do that. But the one thing that you want to remember as we draw the trunk, also true with the legs, is that it's not a flat surface that we're drawing on. We're drawing on a cylinder, basically. Okay, so the trunk is, make that cylinder big enough there. Let me get that out of the way. So we're drawing on a very large cylinder that is almost kind of like a funnel because it gets smaller as you go to the bottom. But depending on how you're looking at that cylinder, let me get my eraser back here and take that out. Depending on how you're looking at that cylinder, you may see these lines go like this, and then they're going to get straighter as you go down, and then the further down you get, they're going to tend to either be straight or curved in the other direction, and they're also going to get closer together and smaller. If you look over here, we've got, with each of these horizontal lines, we've got a pretty good gap in between them, but as we get down here, that gap narrows, and actually the crease seems to be deeper because we're getting a lot more shadowing here. And then when you get down here, the horizontal lines almost blend into one another. So, but think in terms of drawing a cylinder when you're doing this. And one tip that is often helpful is to do what they call drawing through, which means instead of just drawing, kind of a rounded thing like this, what I do is you want to draw through, even if you're not going to see that back portion. You want to sketch it really lightly, but you want to kind of give yourself that feel. Now that said, I'm not going to do that right now, mostly for time's sake. So I'm going to just sketch in these horizontal lines. But if I were taking my time and had hours to work with, then I would take a bit more time and I would draw through with these. And I'm going to just bring that down. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over on this side and I'm going to use my shading to kind of give me a little bit more definition in the trunk. So where each of these bands is, I'm going to make the end of the trunk a little bit more curved. And you don't see it so much on this side because the light's not hitting it the right way. And again, because I'm not going for just extreme detail here, I'm just kind of laying that in. The thing I want to do here is I want to shade this just a little bit more, just to kind of emphasize that, whatever that's called. I'm sure it has a name. Okay, I want to come over here to the eye. Let's add a little bit more shading around the eye. It's very light. I have to erase some of that. Okay, so I've blocked in some shading. Now, again, if you're working with a pencil, at this point you would want to shift to something to blend with. It could be, I mean, again, like I said last week, I've used tissue, I've used paper towel rolled up. You can use a, I keep Q-tip, or I'm trying to think of the generic name, but I can't remember. I'm going to be using digitally, I'm going to be using the hard wet blender. That's over here. Make sure I'm on that. And the hard wet blender is really nice in ArtRage for blending, but you got to watch your size. Now, again, something that often we forget if we're working digitally is you can make things bigger. So when you're working with fine lines and you're working digitally, you can blow it up and it does give you a bit more control. I'm going to shrink that down a little bit to about 17 or 18%. Let's see what I get. It's almost still too much. That's the main thing with the hard wet blender or really almost any of the tools in ArtRage for blending, which is the palette knife. Control can be an issue, so you want to be careful. But if I were doing this again with pencil, paper, and again, tissue, tortillon, blending stump, anything like that, then I'm going to just kind of smooth out those edges. When you get into a bigger area like this, you can blow it up and work it a bit bigger. You still have to watch when you get around an edge, though, because it will tend to make you lose your edge. Other digital software, again, each program kind of has its own. Oops. Let's see. Okay, I'm still good. Each program sort of has its own strengths and weaknesses when it comes to blending and stuff like that. You just have to get used to what the program you're working with does. Don't have that problem if you're working with pencil and paper, the real thing. You just have to get used to using your tools. But with digital work, every app is a little bit different. Okay, let's move that a little bit so I can get to the bottom of that trunk. And there is my shadow, which I want to blend a little bit. Actually, I'm going to kind of touch that up just a little bit more. Let's make that. Remember, it's going to have a bit of a curve to it because the trunk is round. Okay, over there. Okay, I'm going to come back here again. I want to shrink my blender down. Let's just hit this shadow here. I've kind of lost the edge of my ear. So let me come over here and kind of reclaim that. Now, if another thing that you can do digitally is I could actually do all of these things on different layers. I could do my shading on a different layer. I could do, as we're going to see, do my coloring on a different layer. Whoops, I don't want to keep erasing. That's the one joy here. I can have undo, so I can just fix that and go back to what I was doing. And I want to get back to my blender. Okay, I want to work on that eye a little bit. And just hit some of these real quick. Then we're going to color. Now, ArtRage has a very nice watercolor feature. It's not my app of choice for doing watercolor, for doing digital watercolor. I really prefer using a program called Rebelle 4, but it's pretty good. And for what we're going to do here, because we're not going to do a complete painting in the sense that we're going to try to just get every single detail deeply colored. Let me finish this leg down here, get a little bit of the shadowing blended. Now I could come back in when all of this is said and done. And I could add even sharper detail if I want to. I'm kind of enjoying the fuzzy look. We do have some vertical lines here. I'm just going to toss in a few of those. It's kind of like a furrowed brow. And you can dink at it and work at it all day long and still have a lot of fun. Okay. Now, because we're almost out of time, let's look at color real quick. Now, this picture has kind of an orangish tone, and part of it is due to the flash, part of it is due to the sunset here. So what we're going to do is I have already picked up a number of these colors from the picture so that I can kind of get close to it. If I were doing this with regular media, I would either use watercolor, a very, very light watercolor wash, or I would use colored pencil, again, a very light wash. I'm going to go now to my color layer, which I've been drawing on the whole time. I labeled the layer so I wouldn't draw on the wrong one, and I drew on the wrong one anyway. But it doesn't really matter. That's why I couldn't erase that tusk that I was trying to erase. I was on the wrong layer. That's the joys of digital work. But anyway, we're in the color layer. So what I'm going to do, just so I don't mess anything else up, I'm going to add another layer, and we'll do the color on that one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to watercolor. I've already chosen the preset. It's called Dried Strokes. And if I were doing this again with regular watercolor, I would have a dry my paper would be dry, and I would not use a lot of water or color. What I would do is I would thin the color down, way down, and then I would use just enough water to go in the brush. It's called dry brush technique. But what I would get is a very pale coloring like this. And then if you let it dry and go back over it again, you can strengthen the color. It's called glazing. And that is how I would do it if I were using real watercolor. If I were using colored pencils, I would just go in with very, very light strokes. But here, I just want to add a little bit of color to our elephant. I'm not going to go hog wild. Now, the one thing, if you are working digitally and you're working with a stylus, then as long as I keep my stylus on the tablet, as long as I don't pick it up, then the color is not going to change. It's not going to add to it or modify it in any way. If I pick up the stylus and put it back down, then it's going to do what I just showed you over there. It's going to kind of strengthen that color a bit. And so if you don't want to darken your color, then you want to kind of keep from lifting your stylus. Now, when I've colored to the point where I like it, then I'm going to come back in, just lifted my stylus off. I'm going to come in and add a little bit more color to this ear. Remember, this is the side that the light is on. So I want to strengthen that a little bit. I'm going to do the same over here. And I'm going to do one more pass. Pretty much all the same color. I'm not really changing anything away. I could come over here and pick up like this more reddish color and maybe come in here a little bit. If I was working with watercolor and I wanted to lighten it, I could come in and while the paper is wet with some tissue and just blot out areas that I wanted to lighten up just a touch. Like this, I could come here. I would use a soft eraser tool in this program and shrink it down a little bit. Let's say I wanted to have a little bit more highlighting in here, then just come in and lift some of that color out. And the only thing I didn't get to, let me just do it real quick, is coloring those tusks a little bit. Let's go back here, shrink this down, and give those tusks a bit of a cream color. And then just for fun, because you know it almost looks maybe he was digging in the dirt or something. Let's come over and use my pencil for this. Just make it real small and just throw in some little marks there to give him some a little bit of that dirt on the tusk look. Okay, well, I'm not quite finished. Obviously, this area and this area needs to be improved a bit and smoothed out, but you get the idea. We have run out of time, so I hope you'll practice your elephant this week. I hope you'll try coloring it in, and thank you very much for watching. I'm Jim Pence with See the Light, and we'll see you next week with